That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, everybody who watched the channel last year, y'all know I was adamant. I mean, the few of y'all that were actually able to watch and find the flock back in 2019, y'all knew back then I've been adamant that Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy have been horrible values, not only in redraft leagues, but in particular, Dynasty fantasy football. It's been laughable to see where people have been drafting and valuing these players because, I mean, they always treat it as if they're real life NFL general managers. This is just why we were talking about Nick Chubb being a horrendous first round pick, because they ignore what is actually going to happen in fantasy. They ignore the situation and they go, Courtland Sutton, talented. Me draft Courtland. Like that's not really going to help. But now I think the tides may be turning. I mean, we have had a lot of people going out there and just spewing hate onto Jerry Jeudy, spewing hate onto Courtland Sutton, as they both failed this past season. But we knew they were going to fail. We've known that these players, I mean, I don't want to say we know that they're talented. They've been perceived to be talented, but they were put into horrendous situations in 2020 and in 2021, which is why we faded the hell out of them. And now we may be buying in. And of course, we'll dive into everything in this video. But of course, before we get into it, please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you're already subscribed and you want to join an awesome community of Dynasty fantasy football players, probably the largest community of Dynasty fantasy football players there is, consider going and joining our Patreon, where you'll also get access to my rookie rankings, dynasty rankings, get an in-depth podcast breaking down your team when you join, and to go along with this, get every draft guide we ever put out there, get into dynasty leagues with everybody in the community. It's a ton of fun, and I think that should be it. Let's go through, let's dive into this Denver Broncos situation. And right now, I'm recording this on January 29th. So, I mean, we just have a new head coach going over to Denver, but what we don't know yet is who the quarterback is going to be. Now, of course, we had just rumor after rumor after rumor every single day. People were saying, oh, yep, Aaron Rodgers going over to Denver. Aaron Rodgers going to Denver. And I sat there having no Jerry Jeudy in Dynasty, having no Courtland Sutton in Dynasty, and I was praying that it didn't happen, because that was the one thing that could happen that could catapult Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton to being elite level players in fantasy. Because, I mean, if you're going through and looking at what we have had, I mean, as of late for the Denver Broncos at the quarterback situation, let me just pull this up. I didn't write the stats down because I figured it wasn't, I mean, too important to go over the exact numbers, because everybody here knows the quarterback situation has been horrendous in Denver, which is why we are fading their pass catchers. And here, if you're going to be looking at this, Teddy Bridgewater this past year played 14 games. Out of those 14 games, I mean, he averaged 217 passing yards a game. I mean, you're looking at Drew Lock as well, who was able to get in there for 3. Drew Lock, I mean, not much better, hovering just around 200 passing yards a game. And this was always the issue with Denver. It's that while, yes, you can have those wide receivers in horrendous offenses, you can have those wide receivers that are only, I mean, say, a part of an offense that's getting 220 passing yards per game. They can be successful. However, what do you need in that instance? You need that player to be Terry McLaurin. You need that player to be able to go out there, demand over 30% of that team's target share, and just get every ball thrown his way to dominate everybody else on that team. And you have to have no other talent around him. Very similar to Terry McLaurin back in 2019. Now, that's not the case in Denver. I mean, we've talked about this at length, but you have viable wide receivers. You have viable tight ends. I mean, not only do you have Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, but more importantly, to be honest, you have Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler siphoning off a ton of value as well. I mean, with Noah Fant and Albert O at tight end. So if you had a condensed target tree where it was just a lot of 2 wide receiver sets, you just had Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and they were demanding everything or close to everything. Think of, I mean, Ohio State in 2020 when they had just Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson on the field. They weren't letting Jameson Williams on there. Think of that. Just 2 wide receivers funneling everything. Sure, you can have a successful year if you're Jerry Jeudy. However, when you throw on those other talented players into this situation, you simply have to have one of the better passing offenses in the NFL to find success. And that's exactly what we saw. Now, I want to kind of change our mindset on these players because we're at the point of the offseason where, we were making fun of people just going talent, 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 talent last offseason. And the reason we were making fun of those people is because it was August. It was July. You already had the NFL draft. We already kind of understood where all those quarterbacks were going to be. And we knew their quarterback was going to be Teddy Bridgewater. And we knew the situation they'd be in. However, like I said, we're recording this at the end of January. As of today, we have no idea what this situation is going to hold. Now, I will say I would be very surprised if the quarterback is indeed Drew Lock, if the quarterback is indeed Teddy Bridgewater. I think that's honestly not going to happen. Now, if we ask ourselves, well, how are they going to get an upgrade at the quarterback position? Well, clearly, this is the most favorable landing spot for a lot of different quarterbacks. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has talked in depth about wanting to go to the West Coast. I mean, it seems like Denver is his primary destination. And I know we couldn't say this during the season because, a lot of people get mad whenever, the Green Bay Packers are going out there and dominating. If you bring up the idea that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be there forever. If you look at the leverage that he has this offseason, I think it's a much better shot of Aaron Rodgers actually being able to leave Green Bay and go somewhere else. I think that he could force his way out of that situation, just like Deshaun Watson. With Deshaun Watson, of course, there's so much up in the air, but he's also going to be in a situation where he has the entire offseason to possibly clear up just all the smoke around him and be able to move on from the Houston Texans. And then not only that, but what's another star quarterback that had a lot of frustrations with his team last offseason that didn't really have a lot of leverage to be moved? It's coming off his worst career year on a team that just failed miserably. You got Russell Wilson as well. Not to mention you got a lot changing in Las Vegas with Derek Carr. Derek Carr, could be gone from this team this season if both sides agree. So there are a lot of different moving variables, not to mention all these, I don't want to say stud quarterbacks in the case of Derek Carr, but all these quarterbacks that are drastic upgrades over Teddy Bridgewater. I think it's safe to say that this overall offense is going to expand dramatically. Even if they don't bring in one of these veteran quarterbacks, hell, where are they picking this year? They have the 9th pick. They have that 9th pick. They're going to be able to go through. They're going to be able to probably take a Kenny Pickett, take a Matt Corral. And I know nobody's really that high on this year's draft class, but still, are we going to argue that those players don't have more upside than what Teddy Bridgewater did? Of course, they can bust. They can flame out of the NFL. They could be worse than Teddy Bridgewater, but at least there's some uncertainty. At least there's some unknown upside with those guys. Remember, a lot of people in the Dynasty community didn't like Justin Herbert coming in. And clearly, people in the Dynasty community, just as a quick side note, y'all know my opinion. I think people that make Dynasty videos, make Dynasty podcasts, that write Dynasty articles, that talk in the Dynasty group chat, even everybody that plays in Dynasty, everybody's horrible at quarterback evaluation. We have just smashed it every year. Take the quarterback in the great situation that gets the draft capital that has rushing upside. It's that simple. Don't think that you're that great at rookie quarterback evaluation, but I will flex a little bit on y'all here. Myself, I am confident enough to say with my quarterback evaluation that Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Derek Carr are all better than Teddy Bridgewater. And if the Denver Broncos can get to one of those guys, you're going to see this situation be wildly different. Now, we have to ask ourselves, if we have this offense, with the potential to just go bananas, if we have this offense with the potential to go and get that Peyton Manning and have Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas just rush, which of course, we're not going to be projecting these guys to be top 5 wide receivers as you were with guys like Demaryius Thomas. But nonetheless, if we have our version of that in 2022, who is the benefit? Is it going to be Jerry Jeudy? Should you be making your bet on Courtland Sutton? And let's dive into what we have seen with these wide receivers from a production profile standpoint in the same exact context, because keep in mind, they're in the same offense. I think it's fair to evaluate them in a vacuum, and we don't really have to be making too many adjustments. Well, the first thing I want to point out is Jerry Jeudy's still 22 years old. Jerry Jeudy's still going to be developing. If you're looking at the age of Jerry Jeudy, let me pull this up just because it's funny, and y'all know I'm always going to be cherry picking here so we can go and look at someone that was in last year's draft class in Najee Harris. Najee Harris is almost 2 years older than Jerry Jeudy. Harris will turn 24 before Jerry Jeudy turns 23. So at some point this offseason, Najee Harris is going to be 24 years old and Jerry Jeudy is going to be 22. Still incredibly young. You can see him continue to develop and become a much better wide receiver. However, I would make the argument that he's already the dominant guy in Denver. Now, if you look at his rookie season in 2020, of course, it's a little bit of a different context in that here you had no Courtland Sutton through the majority of the season. He averages 7 targets a game. He averages 53 receiving yards a game, and it's his rookie year. I think this is a fine rookie season if you're looking at the context of the offense. I didn't want to go all in on Jerry Jeudy after this rookie season based on the upcoming situation he'd have in 2021 with Courtland Sutton coming back. But, I mean, 2021, this is going to be the main year that we need to be looking at for these wide receivers. And in this season, you actually had Jerry Jeudy going out there and having 5.5 targets a game and close to 50 receiving yards. So he actually takes a step back in year 2. But keep in mind, you had no Courtland Sutton year 1. You had Courtland Sutton coming back year 2. No change at quarterback. So the added in target competition, I mean, you should kind of expect that you are going to get that step back from Jerry Jeudy. Now, like we said, you really need to be looking in at that 2021 season. And let's go right over to Courtland Sutton. Now, keep in mind, Sutton, significantly older than Jerry Jeudy. Courtland Sutton's already 26 years old. So at this time, he's 4 years older than Jerry Jeudy. So you'd imagine that Sutton, I mean, has already come close to his peak. I don't think we can say that Courtland Sutton's going to continue to progress, yada, yada. Come on. I mean, are you expecting a 26-year-old wide receiver to get that much better? If so, let me pull up the Amari Cooper age real quick. I'm pretty sure Amari Cooper, is 27? Yep, Amari Cooper, 27 years old. Are we expecting Amari Cooper to get even better this offseason? No, you're simply not doing that. So Courtland Sutton near his peak. And here in 2021, the totals look very similar to Jerry Jeudy. I mean, Jerry Jeudy was at 5.5 targets a game. Courtland Sutton there at 5.5 targets a game. Jerry Jeudy at 46.5 receiving yards a game. Courtland Sutton at 45.5 receiving yards a game. So it looks like this is a traditional wide receiver 1A and probably just another wide receiver 1A. I don't think there's a wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1B type situation if you look at these totals. But we're not just looking at totals. You have to contextualize everything that you're looking at. This is why, I mean, you can't just play Dynasty Fantasy Football off spreadsheets. This is why you have to, I mean, really look at the situation in the context of this production to get the full picture. And remember, Jerry Jeudy missed a decent amount of time this past season. Jerry Jeudy missed a total of 6 games. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to look at Jerry Jeudy's per game numbers, which every single game he played this year was played alongside Courtland Sutton, and look at those per game numbers and compare it to Courtland Sutton when he didn't have Jerry Jeudy in this offense and he was able to dominate targets. So what I want to do here is I want to break down Courtland Sutton from the perspective of games he played with Jerry Jeudy and games he played without Jerry Jeudy rather than just the total, because I think it's fair to look one for one because we expect both these wide receivers to be healthy this upcoming season and see what are we looking at when they are both on the field. Well, with Courtland Sutton, that 5.76 targets a game that he saw just throughout the entire year takes a dive to 3.8 targets a game with Jerry Jeudy. Now, of course, that's already bad. That's already laughable. But what's even worse is if you actually look at the receiving yards per game. Now, I don't want to reveal the receiving yards per game that you had in the 10 games with Jerry Jeudy for Courtland Sutton. Instead, let's look at without Jerry Jeudy. That way we can kind of see the sharp contrast. And without Jerry Jeudy, you had Courtland Sutton averaging 8.5 targets a game. A straight up dominant alpha wide receiver here in Denver. And he averaged damn near 84 receiving yards a game. 84 receiving yards a game without Jerry Jeudy. I mean, fantastic. But with Jerry Jeudy playing, which is a 10-game sample, this is the sample we should be looking at. Courtland Sutton averaged less than 20 receiving yards a game. He was not close to being startable in fantasy. If you ever put Sutton in that starting lineup alongside, like, you were just getting crushed. You had no help whatsoever. I mean, you were better off going and starting Tim Patrick. You were better off probably starting Laquan Treadwell for the Jacksonville Jaguars this season. Jerry Jeudy was laughably bad. It clearly wasn't the wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1. No, it's just wide receiver 1 and way down the totem pole, wide receiver 2, Courtland Sutton, while Jerry Jeudy's on the field. So I'm taking away from this season that Courtland Sutton is the wide receiver that we should not be buying low on. I think that Jerry Jeudy is going to be the guy who's significantly younger, who was the player that was, I want to say, dominating in targets and dominating with his receiving yards when both wide receivers were on the field. Of course, if you're looking at the total for Jerry Jeudy, it's going to be a little bit deceiving because the context is different than what you have with Sutton. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Mason, should we be that harsh to Courtland Sutton? Of course, he had the 6-game stretch with no Jerry Jeudy where he looked fantastic. Yes, we should be that harsh because let's remember what happened, back in 2019 in Dynasty. And this is why I thought Courtland Sutton was always one of the most overrated wide receivers in Dynasty. And let me pull up his exact size because I know exactly why this happens. With a player like Courtland Sutton, with these guys that look like prototypical Alpha X wide receivers, the second that they hit, everybody's in on him. With Courtland Sutton, everybody from a Devy perspective, even before he got to the NFL draft, he was drafted in 2018. But back in 2017, 2016, people loved Courtland Sutton. Okay, Sutton's been on the radar forever. So the second that he hits, his dynasty value is going to skyrocket, especially because he's 6'3", 218 pounds. He looks like an Alpha X wide receiver. He looks like the part, even if the production isn't there. And what do we care about in fantasy? Do we care about going out there and looking pretty, looking like we have some dominant Alpha X? No, we care about the guys that are going to go out there and put up points. I don't care if Jamison Crowder is a small little slot wide receiver. If Jamison Crowder is going to put up an additional 3 points per game, compared to a monstrous guy like Courtland Sutton, who the hell cares what their size is? And here with Courtland Sutton in 2019, a lot of people got fooled because it was his second season in the NFL. But we have to remember, Sutton stayed all 4 years at SMU. So Courtland Sutton was 24 years old during this season. So it's not like you had that elite jump up, break up at a very early age. No, he was already a little bit older. And also, if you look at the raw season numbers, I believe he went over 1,000 yards. If you're looking at his raw numbers, they look pretty damn good. But is that because Courtland Sutton was going out there and dominating on a per game basis? Or is that because Courtland Sutton didn't miss a game? It's because he didn't miss a game. Come on. This is always so funny. In 2019, he plays 16 games. He gets 1,100 receiving yards. So a lot of people are all in on this Courtland Sutton elite level. If you're looking at a per game basis, Sutton was never special. This is what we always said. You have to change it over to a per game basis. He averaged 7.5 targets a game, 69 receiving yards a game. And if you look at his points per game this year, the wide receiver 27. Yeah, he made the Pro Bowl, but who the hell cares? He was a high-end wide receiver 3 in fantasy. So he actually skyrockets up to being, at one point, I believe he was going in the 3rd, 4th round of Dynasty startup drafts. He's always been an overrated wide receiver. I think that people in Dynasty have just been way too excited about Courtland Sutton. I'm going to be avoiding him on the way down. And instead, I think I'm going to go through and I think I'm going to buy the dip with someone like Jerry Jeudy. Because in that 2019 season, when he had his best year ever and he was a high-end wide receiver 3, the top 4 receiving options on that team with their receptions that year, Courtland Sutton was 72. Royce Freeman was their second best option. Royce Freeman at 43. Noah Fant at 40, and Philip Lindsay at 35. Out of their top 4 receiving options, they didn't have any wide receivers. I know Noah Fant, big name, but at the end of the day, Noah Fant was a rookie that year, a rookie tight end. You're not expecting those guys to produce. So he had no target competition whatsoever, and he still wasn't even that good. So I'm going to be going through fading the hell out of Courtland Sutton's always been overrated in Dynasty. I think we're going to be buying low on Jerry Jeudy and also buying low on Noah Fant. Noah Fant's been a player that's also lost a considerable amount of value. He put up, I don't want to say a mediocre season, but nothing special. If you look at his rookie year, if you look at his sophomore year, and if you look at this past season, it's all been relatively the same. But we also have to contextualize this. I think it's actually more impressive for Noah Fant to go out there and put up a similar year in 2021 compared to what he did in 2020. Because remember, in 2020, you had no Courtland Sutton. Albert O also missed the majority of the year. So with Noah Fant going out there and having 42 receiving yards a game, having 5.5 targets a game, and I know it seemed like Albert O missed a considerable amount of time this season, which I thought, no, he only missed 3 games. So he pretty much played the entire year. Noah Fant actually took a step forward. If you consider the context with this, he's still only 24 years old at the tight end position. And I know a lot of people, including myself, trust me, I didn't know what we were going to be looking at with Noah Fant this offseason until we really dove into the situation. A lot of people are going to be concerned about Albert O because Albert O came out. He had a great second year. He took a step up and became an every down player for this offense. However, clearly, Noah Fant is the tight end 1 in this situation. Albert O didn't take Noah Fant off the field too much on obvious passing down scenarios. What happened is they ran more 12 personnel because they had significant injuries to the combination of Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. Getting those wide receivers back and healthy this season, I'd imagine this team runs a lot more 11 personnel with only one tight end on the field, removes Albert O a little bit more, and even with Albert O going out there, he still averaged about 2.5 targets a game, averaged 23 receiving yards a game. I mean, that's nothing special. I mean, you can go over and look at Atlanta. You have Hayden Hurst almost with the same amount of targets per game, and you have Hayden Hurst with 17 receiving yards a game, and nobody is going out there and saying, oh, you can't buy Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst, he's on the field too much, Hayden Hurst. No, that's not the case. I know Albert O is a lot younger. I know Albert O is 23 years old, so he's going to continue to get better as well. But I'm going to be going out there and I'm going to buy these players that have talent. I believe the players that have talent in Denver are Noah Fant and Jerry Jeudy. They're still incredibly young. They still should continue to get better. I am assuming that given the fact we have 200 days this offseason, that at some point this offseason, you are going to have a decent amount of rumors circulating saying Rodgers to Denver, Russell Wilson to Denver, Deshaun Watson to Denver. Even if it doesn't happen, once those rumors start going, and if we hear that over and over again for a month, I bet you're going to be able to flip Jerry Jeudy at a profit. I mean, if you want to go through and buy someone you don't believe in, like Courtland Sutton, I mean, at a very low price point. His price point hasn't been this low. I mean, he was going at the beginning of the second round in 2018 drafts. I mean, that was in a super flex format. I bet you could go through and trade a mid-second right now for Courtland Sutton. If you want to do that, and then you can potentially flip if a quarterback change does occur, then hell, go do it, because I think that this situation is only going to get better. I mean, there's no way they're going and drafting a wide receiver. There's no way they're going and signing someone. They've already brought back everybody they have. They already have one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the NFL. So yeah, I would go through, and even though we are fading these guys to an extreme amount last offseason, I think now is actually a decent time to go buy low on them. And of course, thank y'all so much for being a part of the flock and supporting the channel. Really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Really hope y'all got something from it. Please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, let me know how stupid I am. Subscribe to the channel. And if you want to join our awesome community, you can find that link down in the description of the video over there on Patreon. You can pretty much find everything that we do. And of course, thank you so much and have a great day.